Philadelphia Phillies are 2008 World Champions of Baseball.
The Philadelphia Eagles are Super Bowl champions. Eagles fans everywhere, this is for you.
Now entering the game for Philly Press Box Radio, Bill Furman and Jim Chet Chesko.
It's Wednesday, November 1st, 2023. Welcome to the Philly Press Box Radio Roundtable, brought to you by the Irish Rover Station House in Langhorne, PA. Allstate Insurance in Westchester, PA. Cavs, Philly Tailgates, and the Edge of Philly Sports Network. I'm Bill Furman. I'll be your host tonight, along with my partner, Jim Chet Chesko. And hey, Chet, the Eagles continue to roll with a 7-1 record, and it's Dallas week. That's always fun. The Sixers have rid themselves of James Harden with a trade to the Clippers. We'll certainly talk about the winners and losers of that trade. The Flyers continue to play pretty good hockey, but is it good enough hockey? We've had a week to think about the Phillies and what went wrong with that. And the Philadelphia Hall of Fame inductions are tomorrow night. You going to that?
I am indeed.
All right. Well, hey, certainly plenty to talk about in Philly sports again this week.
Yeah, we have a real challenge on our hands, squeezing all of that into 1 hour, Bill, but we're going to get it done. We're going to do it. That's
right. And we have a couple great guests to help us get through it tonight. Chet and Tim Kelly of Phillies Nation is going to help us with the Phillies autopsy. We certainly need one for that. And two-time Flyers Stanley Cup champion Joe Watson makes a return visit to Philly Press Box Radio.
Yeah, the Phillies do have a lot to think about over the next few months. They'll have to figure out what they can do to, take that final step. Tim Kelly will give us his thoughts on that. And Joe Watson, just one of those legendary Philadelphia athletes that you and I, Bill, watched back in the day. He's just a blast to talk to also. And, yeah, he is among the Thursday inductions into that Philly Sports Hall of Fame that you mentioned. So let's get it going.
Let's get to it. Let's welcome Tim Kelly back to Philly Press Box Radio. Tim, welcome, my friend.
Hey, guys. Thanks for having me back.
Hey, Tim, always good to see you. We were hoping you'd be covering a Phillies World Series game tonight. Didn't quite work out that way, but oh well. We're going to spend most of our time looking ahead with you this evening. But before we do that, I got to ask you, because it still bugs the crap out of me, how the hell did the Phillies blow 2-0 and 3-2 series leads against the friggin' 84-win Arizona Diamondbacks?
Yeah, I think everybody is still kind of in a state of shock over it. And it's one thing to have your season come to an end when you get that close to the World Series. For fans, it will always burn in that sense. But to be up 2-0, to be up 3-2 going back to Philly, I think that's what makes it feel like there's kind of not an actual conclusion to the season. So I think it's a variety of things. Your bullpen, right-handed pitchers in your bullpen, specifically Craig Kimbrell, Ryan Kerkering, for different reasons, kind of ran out of gas in the NLCS. Aaron Nola, as great as he was for most of the postseason, was not great in Game 6. Like, there's just a variety of things. And the Diamondbacks, by Game 6, remembered that their bread and butter is stealing bases and taking the extra base, and they started to do that again, which it puzzled me why they didn't for the first 5 in this series. So there's a million different things to point to. And then, of course, like, Trey Turner and Bryce Harper, I cannot look at them and say, or Nick Castellanos even, and say, oh, they choked in the playoffs, because for most of the playoffs, they were hitting at a 400 rate, hitting a home run every game or two, it felt like. But, yeah, you had a bunch of guys in those last 2 games kind of all get cold at the same time. Alec Boehm came around for Game 7, but really struggled for a lot of the postseason. So there's a lot of things to figure out. They were 5 wins away from winning the World Series. So I think there's maybe been a little bit too drastic of an overreaction in some senses. But when you blow a 2-0 lead, you blow a 3-2 lead heading back to Philly, that's kind of the reality of it.
Yep.
Well, Tim, I think as you look back at it, the thing that's really troubling to me, credit to the Diamondbacks, not credit to the Phillies, the in-series adjustments that were made by the Diamondbacks. As you mentioned, all of a sudden, hey, let's wake up. Let's start getting on base, stealing bases, getting singles, getting doubles, making plays, getting to our bullpen that was solid. They did a lot of things that were kind of maybe offbeat a little bit in pulling some of their starters early, but it worked out for them. It didn't work out for the Phillies. I didn't see the Phillies make any in-series adjustments.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of that, though, is the Diamondbacks adjusted from what had been a bad plan for the first 5 games. So I don't know how much credit you get for fixing something that you were doing wrong. So, I mean, in that sense, yes, they made an adjustment. With the Phillies, I think if it had been one of Kerkering or Kimbrel kind of loses it in that series, it's kind of easier to push on Rob Thompson or push on someone else. When both of them hit a wall, you didn't get a good game 4 start out of Christopher Sanchez. You had 3 games in a row in Arizona. You were asking a lot out of your bullpen, and ultimately the Diamondbacks came out better in that series because their bullpen pitched better.
All right, let's look ahead. Bryce Harper, you mentioned he struggled at the end, but he was really, really good for, most of the second half of the season and most of the playoffs. And he's, the first baseman for now. We know the Rhys Hoskins situation. Is Bryce Harper going to stay at first base, or might they bring Rhys Hoskins back for a year if Bryce can play the outfield? What's going to happen there?
Yeah, Dave Dombrowski said at last week's season-ending press conference essentially that they hadn't had that discussion yet. So, and even if they had, I don't think they were going to reveal it publicly, because why would they? I think in terms of Harper, he had talked about in the playoffs a willingness to maybe play a little bit of both. And if I had to guess, that'll be what it is. But I think he'll get the bulk of his starts in the outfield next year, if I had to guess. Now, whether that's right or left field, I don't know, because Nick Castellanos seemed like he got comfortable in right field. I'd be a little hesitant to mess with that. And I think left field's a little bit less stress on your body, which might be good for Bryce Harper. So having him play a mix of left field and first base kind of is what I think would be the best mix. But I would say gets 70% of the starts in the outfield next year would be my guess. As far as Rhys Hoskins, the qualifying offer would be $20.5 million. That's a lot to offer to a guy that didn't play last season. Normally, that would be 100%. You give that to Rhys Hoskins. To me, it's not a question of whether the bat comes back. It's can he play first base next year? Because Rhys Hoskins, it's not for a lack of effort, but he was never a good defensive first baseman. And now he's coming off a torn ACL heading into his age 31 season. So I think you have to really consider that, because DH is not an option. Like, Kyle Schwarber needs to be the DH for 75% of the games next year for you to be at your best spot. And the rest of the games, you want to have the possibility of putting Castellanos or Harper or somebody that's banged up but can still hit into the DH spot. You don't want to end up with a situation where you have to put Kyle Schwarber back out in left field because you brought Rhys Hoskins back and it turns out he can't play first base yet or again or whatever the case may be. So I think the Phillies would be a better lineup with Rhys Hoskins coming back. It's whether you can make that defensive fit make sense. And if you don't give him the qualifying offer and he goes into free agency, is there someone willing to give him 2 years? Because to me, bringing Rhys Hoskins back right now is a 1-year engagement, or you kind of let him walk and move forward. So that's kind of how I would weigh out the situation. And it's a situation where I can see it going either way.
Well, to take it one step further, let's go with that. Let's say they do sign him. They put Harper in left. They put Castellanos in right. Schwarber's the DH, and that leaves Marsh, who I think really improved. I think everybody saw that. He proved he can hit left-handed pitching as well as right-handed pitching. You have Rojas. You have Pache. Can you turn that job over to Marsh and run with that every day? Personally, that would be the decision I would make as we sit here now.
I think that would be what you would be doing essentially, is you would have Harper in left, Castellanos in right, whichever, maybe the other way around, but those two in the corner outfield spots. I think Johan Rojas has a good chance to open next year in AAA. Just the way he batted in the postseason, listening to both Dave Dombrowski and Rob Thompson, I don't think it's a stretch to say Johan Rojas might be the best defensive player at any position in baseball based off of what we saw from the few months of him here. But I know people say he hit over 300, but his batting average on balls in play was 400 during the season. The league average is 300. It was not a sustainable clip. And then you got to the playoffs, and he really hit like a pitcher. No disrespect. That's the reality of what it was. And I think he's someone with more – if that's just who he was offensively, then so be it. But I think the Phillies believe he has more upside offensively. He's never played at AAA. So I think in this scenario, you probably open the season with Rojas at AAA and then a platoon of Brandon Marsh and Christian Pache in center field, where I think Brandon Marsh gets the start in 75% of the games. But the Phillies do say, like, while they feel more comfortable with Marsh against lefties, they're still not going to necessarily expose him to – Dave Dombrowski brought up the name Randy Johnson. Like, you have the best of the best lefty starter or reliever. You're still probably not going to use Marsh in that situation. And that's when Pache, who, for as great as Rojas is, Pache is an insanely good fielder too as well. So I think you do that to start the season, and then you kind of see where you're at. Does Marsh hit against lefties? Does Rojas show you signs of life offensively? And you go from there.
Yeah. None of the three of them are hitting off Randy Johnson, by the way.
No, they aren't. Some of them may have acted like it last week in the playoff series, but no, they're not.
And let's talk about the third baseman. Alec Boehm had a very good season, 20 home runs, 97 or whatever RBI. Didn't do a whole lot in the postseason, but he did hit the homer in that last game. What's the upside for Alec Boehm? How good can he be?
Yeah, it's kind of a frustrating question because you see moments like two people can watch Alec Boehm and come away with completely different conclusions. And I don't necessarily think either one of them is wrong. Like, on one hand, he can drive in 100 runs, and he has improved defensively at third base. On the other hand, he still grades out pretty poor defensively at third base, and he had 20 home runs this year. You kind of want him to be more in the 25 to 30 range. And you just wonder, is Alec Boehm somebody that is going to reach his potential, or is he somebody that shows you enough flashes to keep you intrigued but never really fulfills exactly what you thought he was going to be as a number 3 overall pick? He's cheap right now, so my inclination would be to bring him back. But as he gets more expensive, he'll be arbitration eligible this year for the first time. And certainly as he ticks towards free agency, he's going to have to be able to be like a 30 home run guy to make his style work, I think, long-term with the Phillies.
Well, Tim, I have a question that you're going to have to probably dig into the history books a little bit on this, because I don't think you're old enough to remember. But Chet certainly does. In the late 70s and 1980, the Phillies had a manager named Danny Ozark, and the Phillies had really good teams. They couldn't get over the hump until they got rid of Danny Ozark, who was a player's favorite manager. They also got Pete Rose to win the World Series in 1980 and go back again in 1983. Is Rob Thompson today's Danny Ozark? I'm not sure that he can win with this team.
No, I mean, the Phillies didn't make the playoffs for 10 years, and then Rob Thompson took over, and they made the World Series and the NLCS in back-to-back seasons. So it would be hard for me to kind of come away with the conclusion here that he's the problem, because if Trey Turner and Bryce Harper, or even one of them, hits in Game 6 or Game 7 of the World Series, or Aaron Nola pitches a little bit better, the Phillies are in the World Series for the second year in a row. Maybe they win it, maybe they lose it, but I think Rob Thompson has done a very good job. I think the players manager is the right person for this veteran team. And honestly, I don't think that the style of come in and flip the spread or whatever people envision is something that players or really anybody wants to be around in 2023. Joe Girardi was super intense, and the Phillies did not play well with him as their manager. Rob Thompson is the opposite of that, and the Phillies have responded to it much better. Now, it's kind of a blessing and a curse, because when you stick with the guy one too many times, you go to Craig Kimbrell one too many times, you don't switch up the batting order, then you say, oh, you should have flipped this up. But at the same time, his whole style has been he's patient, he rides through the ups and downs of the season and even in the postseason, and you come out on the other side and you think, well, Rob Thompson rode this out when other people panicked, and it turned out that whatever player, Nick Castellanos, whoever, turned things around and got better. So I think we overrate in general how much of an impact managers have in baseball. And I think when you've been one of the final 4 teams 2 years in a row, it's hard for me to look at the manager and say that he shouldn't have a job.
Yeah, I agree. I think it was good to hear him say in the season-ending news conference that he did learn from his mistakes and that he might do some things differently. Maybe he was too loyal to some of those guys. And he mentioned the bullpen without mentioning Kimbrel and the kid by name. So hopefully he has learned his lesson about all that. Now, let's get to the starting pitching. Aaron Nola, of course, the big question. He is a free agent. He earned himself a lot more money with the way he pitched over the last month of the season and postseason. They say he is a priority. Do you think Nola will be back? How serious are they gonna go after him?
Oh, I think they're going to be serious about going after him. It's just a matter of he's going to get, I think, around a 6-year, $200 million deal. So on one hand, you have a guy that's racked up a ton of innings, has not missed a start in like 6 seasons, has 2 or 3 of those seasons over the last 6 where he's been a Cy Young type pitcher, and then 3 others where he's been varying degrees of a starting pitcher, but he's always there. And I think sometimes when you're watching Aaron Nola from start to start and breaking it down, you lose track of the fact that there are 20 other teams that would kill to have a pitcher at the front of their rotation or middle or whatever you think that pitches every 5 days. I think he's second in innings pitched over the last 5 years to only Garrett Cole. There's a little concern, I think, in the sense that how long is that sustainable? But my thought process would be your number one priority going into this offseason is to try to keep him. The problem is Julio Urias, who was supposed to be one of the other top pitching free agents, he got arrested for domestic violence for the second time. His career might be over. Shohei Ohtani is not going to pitch next year. He's a free agent. You have Sonny Gray, who had a really nice season with the Twins but struggled previously in a big market. I think there's 4 or 5 or 6 teams that will pursue Aaron Nola outside of the Phillies. And if one of them is willing to go to a 7th year, like you do have to have a cutoff point somewhere. I think the Phillies would like to retain Aaron Nola. I think Aaron Nola's his desire would be to remain in Philadelphia from having talked to him a few times about it throughout the course of the postseason. But I don't think this is a slam dunk going in. I feel about it just about how I felt when JT Realmuto became a free agent a few years ago, where maybe the Phillies are the number 1 pursuer of him, maybe they're number 2, but like there are other serious suitors, and there certainly is a possibility that he's not back here next year, and you need to be able to pivot and have a plan B and C.
Mm-hmm. I agree with you on the Nola. I just have to tell you both, I disagree with you on Rob Thompson, but that's okay. What I do want to ask you about Taijuan Walker and how that played out. I don't know that maybe there wasn't a place for him. But somewhere along the line, you would have thought along the playoff trail, they might have been able to at least get him in. And I mean, he did lead the team in wins, whether that's a little misleading or not. But you make anything of Taijuan being not happy with how this played out?
The Phillies, they're aware of it. They didn't deny that they're aware of it, but they don't seem to be particularly concerned. He's under contract for 3 more years. Frankly, it's not like an enticing contract that other teams are going to be lined up to trade for. He's a nice guy. He works hard. There's no question about that. And I think there are just some guys, I don't mean this as a disrespectful thing, that are regular season players. And the way he pitched this year, he's kind of in that. Because in the regular season, you need guys that can go 6 innings and give up 3 or 4 runs every time and keep you in the game, even if they're not ace-level pitchers. In the postseason, though, it's really hard to trot out a guy that has never pitched in relief. And when he started, he really seemed to have a lot of trouble with velocity and big innings to start the game. You don't want to open up the playoffs in a hole 4 or 5-0 after 1 inning against the Braves or whoever. And I think that's kind of the situation they ran into. Had they gone to the World Series, you've seen a couple times now where games have been blowouts in either direction. I think maybe he would have come in to pitch, but I mean, that's not the type of situation anyone dreams of coming into a playoff game in. So the reality is they're going to mend whatever fences need to be mended. But if he comes back and has a similar season, I don't think he's going to win 15 games again. That was not sustainable for the level that he pitched at. But B, I think he's going to find himself in a similar position next postseason if he doesn't figure out why he didn't have velocity in the first innings and how he can be a little bit more effective. They only used a 4th starter 1 time in the playoffs. So it's not as though Christopher Sanchez or Michael Lorenzen or anyone else made a bunch of starts. They used it once. It didn't go great. It wasn't a train wreck, but it didn't go great. And they never had that come into play again. So I don't think they went into the playoffs thinking there's no way Taijuan Walker can pitch or else he wouldn't have been on the roster. But I do think had they gone to the World Series, there's a chance maybe they would have realized this is a waste of a roster spot and the better to put on Junior Marte or Dylan Covey or somebody that can pitch out of relief than Taijuan Walker, who clearly they were not comfortable with using out of the bullpen.
Going to be an interesting offseason for sure. Tim, we pretty much used up all the time we had for you, but I got to sneak in one football question. It's Cowboys-Eagles week. How do you see the game going Sunday?
I think that they have 2 games in the next 6 weeks. I think they'll probably split those, and that's probably good enough for the Eagles. Like, if the Cowboys want to win the division and have any shot at taking the number 1 seed in the NFC, they pretty much need to sweep the Eagles and hope that the Eagles also stumble in this really difficult stretch that they're in over the next 6 or 7 games. So I think if the Eagles can split those, they're in good shape. It'd be even better, obviously, for them to take both of those because you have the Chiefs, you have the Bills, the 49ers. I don't remember like a 5 or 6 week stretch in my lifetime where the Eagles have had a harder slate of games.
Mm-hmm.
I'm with you. Hey, Tim, before we let you go, let the listeners and viewers know where they can follow all you have going on with Philly Nation and everything else you do.
Yeah, PhilliesNation.com, and then on all social channels, Twitter, X, whatever it's called, Threads, Facebook, Instagram, at Tim Kelly Sports. You can follow me.
All right,
awesome.
Tim. Hey, we appreciate you joining us again. Let's do it again.
All right. Thanks, guys.
All right,
Talk
Tim.
to you in the spring. Thanks, Tim. See ya.
All right, Chet. Winter is coming fast. Gas prices are higher than we want them to be. It's time for you to save some money with Allstate's pay-as-you-go auto insurance.
Yes, sir, Bill. Allstate's pay-as-you-go auto insurance puts you in control. You only pay for the miles you drive with the same full coverage that a traditional policy offers. Pay-per-mile insurance gives customers greater control of their insurance costs. See how much you can save with pay-per-mile car insurance by calling your local agent in Westchester, Pennsylvania. That is Dave Lavoie. Dave Lavoie at Allstate in Westchester. Call him 610-430-0700. Once again, 610-430-0700.
Hey, Chet, while you're out, what you got going on over at the Irish Rover Station House?
Well, funny you should ask, Bill. There's always something good going on at the Irish Rover Station House. My goodness. They have dinner specials Thursday through Sunday. They have killer burgers every Thursdays. They are delicious, by the way. Live music on the weekends this Saturday. The tunes come courtesy Shawnee Mac. And coming up in a couple of weeks, there is that yoga and drinks event that is kind of intriguing. Yoga and drinks. It'll be on the patio on November 19th. Boy, it better be warm out there. Always a good time and great food and drinks at the Irish Rover, Bellevue Avenue in Langhorne. Get all the details on their website. That, of course, IrishRoverStationHouse.com. And with that, Bill, I give you this.
Hey, everybody, it's Willie Nile here, and you're listening to Chet and Bill on Philly Press Box Radio. You lucky people.
Thank you to Willie. It's always good when he stops by. Well, hey, Chet, let's talk some Eagles. Again, maybe not a pretty win in Washington, but the Birds are 7-1, and nobody else in the NFL is 7-1. So we got that, and it's Dallas week.
Yeah, all of that is true. The Eagles have still not played a perfect game this year, but they keep winning 7-1. They've had some clunkers like the Jets game. They've had many others where they were, kind of so-so, but still managed to pull it out. They should have beat Washington by more than a touchdown, certainly. Washington got the late touchdown, and twice the Eagles fumbled inside the Commanders' 5-yard line. One by Hurts, the one by Kenny Gainwell. So should have been much more blowout, but it never seems to be when they play Washington.
No, Washington always plays them tough, and they always have trouble covering Redskins receivers, Commanders receivers, Washington receivers. They did a pretty good job on McLaren this week, but that wasn't the problem.
Yeah, Sam Howell still threw for almost 400 yards. I don't know how they make him look like Joe Montana. It's just amazing because he's mediocre at best against everybody else. But give him credit, give the Redskins credit, give Eric Bieniemy credit. They seem to know how to do things against the Eagles, but just come up a little bit short, thankfully, for the Birds.
Yeah. Hey, Joe put this up there, and this is exactly where I was going to go. A.J. Brown is first-team All-Pro at this point in the season. A.J. Brown is off the charts, along with Tyreek Hill. They're in a class by themselves.
Courtesy NBC Sports Philadelphia. His last 6 games, look at that. 7, 8, 9, 10 catches a game, 125-plus yards, all 6 games. First time that's ever been done in the NFL. So, yeah, he's having a season for the ages, right up there with T.O.'s 2004 season with the Birds.
Yeah, and like you say, I would put A.J. and Tyreek Hill kind of in a class by themselves at this point. Justin Jefferson's been a little banged up, so he's fallen off, a little bit. But, man, these guys are really, really good. And with that Commanders game this week, Devontae Smith added 99 yards. So, yeah. As they get double coverage this weekend by Dallas, Devontae Smith, Dallas Goedert, maybe even Julio Jones, going to get a lot of activity.
Yeah, how about Julio getting a touchdown reception? That was a great pass, by the way. I mean, it had to be right there, and it was perfect. So good for Jalen Hurts, good for Julio Jones catching his first of hopefully many receptions.
Yeah. Now I do have to ask you. We saw the Jets game, and we saw the Eagles' unwillingness to run the football. We saw the Dolphins game where they came out running the football. And then we go back to the Commanders game, and we don't want to run the football. What do you make of it? I mean, do you think it's just what they're expecting from the defense, that they're planning the game plan around that? Or why not come out and do what you do best?
Yeah, it's part of that. I guess they think they can throw on just about anybody, and maybe they can, but they've also got some talent in the running back group. I don't know if they're afraid to use DeAndre Swift more than they have been lately, but they got to get him going again because he was so good earlier in the season. They apparently don't want to play Rashard Penny for whatever reason, but Boston Scott is a guy who should be getting more play than he does. They always use him against the Giants, and he always succeeds. But I think he can play against some other teams, too, other than, an occasional play here and there and special teams. So get Boston Scott some carries, too.
Well, yeah, and I think, here we're almost at the halfway point of the season. And if you add, hopefully, some playoffs games, we're not even at the halfway point. But I guess in my mind, I'm thinking they're just trying to lessen the load, as it's a marathon and not a sprint. Mm-hmm. So they're splitting the quarters, first and third, second and fourth. Gainwell plays that second and fourth quarter. Almost seems like religiously when the clock hits 0, we're switching backs.
Yeah, I don't know. It's not one of my favorite things about Nick Sirianni, how he does that. But just as you question Rob Thompson, and all of us do, we can do that about Sirianni too. Not all of his moves are what we would do if we were in that job, but hey, that's the way it is. Gainwell's been a disappointment, frankly. I heard on the radio yesterday that there are 41 running backs with enough carries to qualify for, the yards per carry leaders. He is 40th out of 41 at just 3.4 yards a carry or something like that. So he has not been great. Plus he had the key fumble last week. So I want more from Kenneth Gainwell.
Yeah, well, and again, I think it's maybe a little too early to judge Sirianni on this, because if he's got a fresh Swift and a fresh Gainwell come week 14, 15, 16 on through the playoffs, then he looks like a genius. And nobody's hurt at week 12 because they've got 200 carries already, So we'll see how it plays out in the long haul. And I just have to throw this out on the side. What about Gainwell answering a tweet at halftime? What?
I was going to mention that too. Come on, man. Yeah. First of all, you shouldn't go back and forth with fans on social media. Right. That never turns out well. And second of all, I think the phones are supposed to stay in the lockers at halftime. So come on, Kenny. Be better, as you would say, Bill.
That's right. Be better.
Oh, speaking of tough, check this out. The schedule that Tim alluded to, that is not easy. We got the Cowboys this week, then the bye, thankfully, and then that stretch. Chiefs, Bills, 49ers, Cowboys, and Seahawks. So that is this Sunday and then 5 after that. Real tough games. Now, the good thing is I think the Eagles are going to be favored in most of them, except maybe at Kansas City. But still, that's a tough stretch of games right there. But if you come out of that 4-2, I think you're doing okay.
Yeah, and 4-2 is probably good enough.
Yeah.
And as you look down there at Dallas and at Seattle back to back, that's not an easy task either. Going out to Dallas, flying back home, going out to Seattle, going back home. That's not easy either.
Yeah, we'll go 4-2, and I'll be happy.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. More Eagles talk next week. But, hey, in the meantime, let's give a shout-out to all the shows at the Edge of Philly Sports Network. The gang, as always, has all the bases covered. You can also catch all the action on www.eopsports.com. as well as Edge of Philly Sports on YouTube. You can also find our show on the Philly Press Box Radio YouTube channel. And please help us out by hitting all those subscribe, follow, and like buttons. And as always, share with your family and friends. And don't forget to look us up now on Twitter at Philly Space Press Box Space Radio.
We occasionally... Oh, turn the mic on, Chesco. We occasionally do get asked about the audio podcast versions of our show, which have pretty much been really difficult to find since back in March. Well, some good news on that front. As we mentioned last week, our last 7 or 8 shows now are available on both Spotify and Amazon Music. And if you really look for them, they're on Google Podcasts too, but it's still not the way it should be there. But if you use Spotify, either the website or the app, you will be able to find us, and I'm going to put this up right now. That's what it looks like if you go onto Spotify. You'll see the green logo up top, Philly Press Box Radio, and then it's got my name under there for some reason, Bill. I don't know how that happened. Nothing personal, believe me. And if you use Amazon Music, it looks like this. So you'll see the logo and the recent shows, including, Frank Close and Kate Scott, Kevin Stalker, going all the way back to Merrill Reese, I believe. Right after Labor Day. So check us out on there, Spotify, Amazon Music, still working to get everything properly on Apple Podcasts, but we may have to, Bill, call in a lawyer for some help.
All right, guys, let's talk about Cherry Law Firm. If you get hurt at work in a motor vehicle accident, personal injury, or affected by criminal law, you got to call David R. Cherry of the Cherry Firm. Call 610-565-0300 or go to cherryinjurylaw.com. Let David R. Cherry fight for your rights. Again, that number is 610-565-0300. That's 610-565-0300 or go to cherryinjurylaw.com. Let David R. Cherry fight for your right.
Hey, Chet, before we close up on the Eagles, Robert makes a good comment I want to throw up here real quick and get your thoughts on. Too many 425 games. What do you make of that national TV 425 game every week?
Well, that means you're a good team. When you're a good team, you're going to get a lot of primetime games and a lot of 425 games. I think that the 2 games against Washington and maybe one against the Jets, I don't know, they had like 2 1:00 games, and now most of the rest of them this season are going to be later in the day. So that's just the way it is. It's the price of being a very good team that demands a national audience.
Yep. All right. Hey, we're going to talk Flyers, but I want to throw this up there. PJ just put this up. Carter Hart is injured. They just made a roster move today to make some goalie adjustments in their roster. So hopefully this isn't too serious. We don't like Carter Hart hurt. But, hey, in the meantime, you had a chance to sit down with 2-time Flyers Stanley Cup champion Joe Watson. And as mentioned early on, he will be inducted into the Philadelphia Sports Hall of Fame tomorrow night while you are in attendance.
How about that? Yeah, we had a real good chat, Joe Watson and I, yesterday. It was that it took place. We talked about the induction. We talked about the current Flyers, the 50th anniversary of that 1973-74 Cup-winning team, and much, much more. Here is that conversation. We talked with this guy once before on Philly Press Box Radio, nearly 2 years ago, when we finally got him back with us. It is a legendary Philadelphia Flyers defenseman from the Broad Street Bullies era. Welcome back to Philly Press Box Radio, Joe Watson.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be back. I always like to talk hockey. You sound like you're very knowledgeable hockey man, so I'd love to talk to you about hockey and the Flyers.
Well, Joe, this is a big week for you. In that Thursday evening, you'll join Philly sports greats like Jay Wright, Jeremiah Trotter, Carlos Ruiz, Bernard Hopkins, and Irving Fryer in being inducted into the Philadelphia Sports Hall of Fame. We'll talk about that in a few minutes, but yeah, let's talk a little Flyers hockey first. I'm just wondering, how closely do you watch the current Flyers, and what are your impressions of this team?
I watch them closely, and I'm very impressed with what's going on. I watch it closely, and I enjoy this team, and they're exciting to watch. They're young kids that are going to grow into being real good athletes for the Flyers.
Heartbreaking loss Monday night. They are off to a decent 4-4-1 start, though. There are veterans like, Sean Couturier, Cam Atkinson, and Travis Konecny, but a lot of young guys, too. Anyone in particular catching your eye with their play?
Bobby Brink. Bobby Brink he's got lots of speed. I enjoy watching him because I tell you, just a matter of time before he starts scoring a lot more goals than he is right now. He's got 2 goals, I think he has.
Yep.
But some other young players that are going to get better. The game is emphasis on speed now, and we have the speed. We can compete with anybody as far as I'm concerned. And they have some young players coming up. They drafted well the last couple of years.
Yeah.
They had a couple kids that play at Boston College. Their 19-year-old kids are going to be playing for the Flyers the next year or so. Bodes well with the Flyers, the way they're building their team. And goaltending is key for every team to have success. And I think our goaltenders, although the other night when we played the other day, the afternoon game against Anaheim, I thought they had a lot of lucky goals. There were bad breaks against the poor goalie. I felt bad for Erkson.
Yeah.
I think Erkson is going to be a goalie for the Flyers for years, too.
Yeah, and everybody loves Carter Hart, too. Now, let me ask you, as a defenseman, back in your day, do you watch guys like Cam York, Travis Sanheim, Nick Seeler, and the other D guys more closely, perhaps?
Well, not that much because I know what they can do, So the ones I like to watch are the ones that unexpectedly do something that you don't expect. And when they do something unexpectedly, that means they have talent and they know what they're doing. They're going to be good hockey players.
Okay.
But the other guys you mentioned, sure, I've watched them for a few years. I like that Nick Seeler.
Yeah.
He's a tough kid, man. He demands respect out there. And a lot of guys won't challenge him after what he did to that guy there a couple of weeks ago in Dallas. He dinged him, and down he went. If you get him upset, he might clean house on these guys, so they stay away from the guy. But there's a lot of good young players that we have, and they work hard, and with the coaching staff that we have. Morgan Frost, I thought, played well last night. He set up some nice goals, although we didn't score, but guys had good chances off his passes, so I'm glad they had him in the lineup because he did well.
Yep. Okay, Joe, let's go back in time 50 years to the fall of 1973. The Flyers were coming off their first winning season, their first playoff series win over the Minnesota North Stars. Bobby Clark had been named the Hart Trophy winner as the league's MVP. Rick McLeish had a 50-goal season. So when you started the 1973-74 season, did you guys have any thought of maybe contending for a Stanley Cup?
Well, I tell you, the year before we got beat up against Montreal, I think it was in 5 games. And every game was so close that I think if we had had better goaltending, I think that we could have gone further and maybe gone into the Stanley Cup because Montreal, I believe, won the Stanley Cup that year, and they beat us in 5, and every game was so close. And after the playoff series, I remember Clarkie coming in and they told the coaches to get out of the dressing room and the trainers. Mm-hmm. And he says, listen, boys, we have a real good team here. Let's take care of ourselves this summer and come back and be ready to go. And that's when we started believing in ourselves.
Well, before winning the Cup in May of 74, the Flyers had a wild back-and-forth 7-game series against those hated New York Rangers. And in Game 4, the first goal of the game was scored by, well, the guy I'm talking to.
Dave Schultz trying to center it, gets it to Kindrachuk. Checked by Nielsen. Out in front, the pass behind Schultz. Kept in by Joe Watson. Screen shot. Deflection to Kindrachuk. Kindrachuk with it. Over to Joe Watson. He shoots. Score! Joe Watson. As Tuckerman was screened and tied up in front there, he couldn't see the shot at all. And Joe Watson gets the first goal of the game. Philadelphia leads it 1-0.
Now, you only had 3 playoff goals in your career, but I bet you remember that one against the Rangers.
Well, oh boy, I'm surprised I had that many goals. You try to remember every goal you scored. I never scored. I probably scored 40 goals in my NHL career. For the most part, my job was to try to prevent them from scoring, and that's the way I played. I played very defensive style of play. I didn't get up the ice a lot. although I did against the Russians in '76, and I scored that shorthanded goal against them.
Yeah.
My basic job was to try to keep our end clean and let the offensive players take care of that and score goals. But yeah, I remember the Ranger series. That was a tough series, and I thought the Rangers were the best team in the league that year, and we beat them. And I remember then we had to go up against Boston. I remember talking to Orr after we knocked Boston off. We never thought you guys would beat the Rangers. We were preparing for the Rangers opposed to the Flyers. And our first game in Boston, we got beat 3-2. I remember Orr scored the goal off my foot with about 30 seconds to go, and then I think we realized that we can beat this team, and we did beat them. We beat them physically and as well as in the scoreboard. It was quite a series.
An epic 6-game series, and you won the 6th game 1-0. Nearly 50 years have passed since all that, and you still get asked about all of that, I'm sure, a lot by old-timers like me.
Well, I do. And you know what? People talk about the Russian game. I played in the golf tournament yesterday at DuPont Country Club, and I tell you, people remember where they were and when we played the Russians in 1976.
Selesky on the right wing. Selesky the drive. Save it.
Joe Watson, the Smithers Thundermouth, who gets maybe 1 or 2 or 3 a year, but Denmark, the Flyers using the Soviets.
Isn't that incredible? It's like 50-some. It's almost 50 years, for God's sake. But we made such an indent in their history and their lives that they certainly paid attention. But I'm surprised when I do talk to people, they still remember the Russian game in '76.
Oh, yeah. Hey, Joe, I hate to bring up a not-so-great memory, but didn't your 1974 Stanley Cup ring ended up getting stolen about 10 years ago? That was never recovered, was it?
No, it was my daughter. My daughter. See, what happened was they give rings to the wives, too. Mm-hmm. And my ex-wife, who is my ex-wife now, she gave the ring to my daughter. And, it was stolen. You're right, it was stolen. Yeah, about, I don't know how long ago it was, but my daughter never got the ring back. That's true, yeah.
Well, let's get back to some more pleasant stuff, Joe. You are already in the Flyers Hall of Fame and the British Columbia Hall of Fame. And now, Thursday evening, you're being inducted into the Philadelphia Sports Hall of Fame. Congratulations. That is quite an honor.
Yeah, it really is. To get inducted into anything is an honor, and I'm very pleased with that they considered me, and I'm looking forward to it. I got a lot of stories. I know we only have 3 minutes to talk, so I'm going to have to condense a lot of my stuff, but I'll do it very quickly, and I'm going to bring up the history of the Flyers in 1967 when we never thought we'd be here after a year. But Mr. Snyder prevailed, and he pursued, and so on and so forth. So there's a good story about the Flyers when we lost the roof in February of '68, and we had there was no money coming in because we were playing all our games on the road, and Mr. Snyder needed an infusion of cash, and he did get the cash from a banker, Gerard Trust Bank, Bill Bear, and the rest is history.
Mm-hmm. That's going to be a great night, by the way. I can't wait for that Thursday evening at Live Casino. Joe, is it true that you got the ball rolling, or the puck, I guess, in putting together the first Flyers alumni hockey team back in the mid-'80s?
Yep. Yes, I started the team in 1984, and our very first game was against the Delaware State Troopers, and we got $500 for the game, and I gave each guy $25 because we didn't have jerseys at the time. We needed jerseys, so I saved some of the money that we made from the hockey game, and I gave each guy $25. So I think we got about $200 left, and we started pursuing uniforms for our alumni team. But yes, I started that in '84, and now we got a very, very successful. Our alumni has just grown leaps and bounds because of Brad Marsh.
Yeah.
Brad Marsh has taken our alumni association to a higher level, and I think our alumni association is as good as any of all the big sports, basketball, baseball, football, and hockey. Our alumni is as good as any alumni in all the sports.
Well, in connection with this being the 50th anniversary of that first Cup season, the Flyers and Bruins alumni will play an alumni game in late January. The big question, Joe, you are 80. Will you lace up the skates and play again for this alumni game?
They asked me to play it. I said, yeah, I'll go out and play. I don't know if I can do much, but I'll be out there. I shouldn't say this, but I never wore a helmet in my life. And they asked me to wear a helmet. I said, well, God almighty, I've just never worn one in my life, and I don't know if I want to put one on. I don't want to tell my wife that. But anyway, we'll see. But I'm pretty sure I'm going to play, yeah.
Joe, I got to tell you, we had your old pal Bob Hound Kelly on a few weeks ago, and you know what he had to say about the prospect of you playing? He said,
I think Joe Watson's 80 years old. I think he wants to play. I said, Joe, nobody wants to see an 80-year-old man skate down the ice.
I hope I can get down the ice and get back.
Good old Hound. I'm sure he'll be there Thursday night. The Flyers are just great. So many of the old timers, stick together. Most of them still live in the Philly, South Jersey area. So it's going to be a great night. That's at Live Casino. The Philadelphia Sports Hall of Fame. Joe Watson will be one of the new members. Congratulations, Joe.
Hey, Chet, thanks very much for considering me, and I enjoyed the interview, and I look forward to seeing you on Thursday night.
As always, great job. As always, Joe is really good.
So much fun talking to these old retired athletes, thinking back on the glory days, and Joe's one of the best, and really congratulations to Joe. Looking forward to seeing him and the other inductees tomorrow night.
So many stories. Ex-players just have so many stories. You could go on and on forever.
Yeah.
All right.
We could talk about a lot more with Joe, and hopefully we'll have him back again. So, hey, one other thing. I guess you saw Robert. Did you see Robert's message? We lost a legend, Bobby Knight, dead at 83. Yeah, he had a long illness, which I wasn't aware of, but 83 years old. He's the 6th winningest Division I coach of all time, I believe. 3 national titles. Bobby Knight, dead at age 83 down in Indiana.
Yeah, I saw that actually just right before our show started. That came through. Yeah, I got to see Bobby Knight, be around him a little bit at some of these memorabilia shows. He was doing them up until the last couple of years. He was kind of on a roll there. Maybe he knew he was sick and he was making some money or whatever it was. But he was a lot nicer when you saw him in person than when you saw him coaching. A little intense.
Certainly a legend.
Absolutely. Well, hey, Chet, it's prediction time, pal. And
it is.
But before we get to let you gloat again for just a little while longer, how are you, Boop, Bob Patron Jr., to his friends, Boop, doing through week 8 on both our picks and our margin of victory pool?
Well, Bill, we did much better in week 8 than we did in week 7 when we smelled like bad fish. I'll tell you about the margin of victory pool in a bit, but regarding our regular pick'em stuff, you and I were both a perfect 4-0 on the weekend, Bill. Boop was 3-1. So for the season, Boop and I are now again tied for the top spot at 21-11. You, Bill, are just 2 games back at 19-13. So we got a race, and we're expanding this week, Bill. We're going to go crazy and pick 5 games.
Yeah, we threw a couple games in here, so let's get to our week 9 picks. Then we'll come back to our margin of victory. As you mentioned, we added a couple, so we'll start out with the Dolphins versus the Chiefs in Germany, Sunday morning. Chiefs -2.5. Who you got?
I'm going to give you Boop's first, and once again, I just printed this out right before the show.
You don't even have to say who Boop's taking.
Yeah. All right. Boop says, seems the only things that can stop Patrick Mahomes are a missing offensive line, Super Bowl 55, and the flu last Sunday. Sure, always an excuse. He's picking the Chiefs. I thought about taking the Dolphins in this one, but I'm going to take Kansas City as well.
I'm taking Kansas City as well.
They're going to bounce back.
And they'll cover that 2.5 easily.
Yeah.
All right. Seattle at Baltimore. The Ravens -5.5. This is kind of an interesting game. A little bigger spread than I was thinking.
Yeah. Only Jacksonville, Boop says, has a longer current winning streak than Baltimore. The Jags have won 5 in a row. Baltimore's won 3 in a row. He is taking the Ravens. I'm taking Baltimore as well.
I'm taking them at home as well.
Yeah, they're playing well.
I hate that. Giants visit the train wreck called the Las Vegas Raiders. As of last night when I put this together, the Raiders were -2.5. I don't know what they are now. They don't have a GM. They don't have a head coach. They don't have an OC, and they made a quarterback change all today.
Yeah. So Boop sent me his thing yesterday, which I did not look at, but he says, from the rainy swamps of North Jersey to the heathen desert, what could possibly go wrong? Raiders. Yeah, despite all of the crazy situation out in Vegas, I'm taking them as well because the Giants stink.
The Giants do stink. The Raiders are going to stink worse this week, and for some unknown reason, I'm going to take the stinking Giants. Well, no, it's not unknown reason. They just cleared the house.
Yeah.
How are you going to do that on Wednesday and play a game on Sunday and with a rookie quarterback? They're a train wreck.
You may be
Giants.
right on this one, but I'm going to stick with Las Vegas just because I am.
All right. Washington visits New England. New England is a -3.5.
Boop says, remember that you heard this here first. Washington will be the only road team to win this week. Wow. He's taking the Commanders. I'm taking the Commanders as well. They impressed me enough against the Eagles. Maybe Sam Howell can play well against somebody else too. I'm taking Washington.
Well, I was going to take Washington in this game too because I didn't think either one of you would take them. I'm going New England.
So
I'm going to go New
so.
England.
I'll
get both of my games back this week.
Okay, we'll see about that.
All right, then we got the big one. Cowboys come to the Link to visit the Eagles. The Birds are 3-point favorites at home, which basically means it's even.
Boop says the Birds have played down to a lot of opponents this season and escaped. That won't have to happen here. He's taking the Eagles. I got to be honest, I'm a little concerned about this game. It could go the bad way, but I'm taking the Eagles. I think they are going to be able to pull it out, but it's not going to be easy. Taking the Eagles.
No, it's going to be a good game. I think we have to say that Dallas is a pretty good team. We don't ever like to say that, but they are. They're not as good as the Eagles. I'm going Eagles.
Yeah. All right. So you have Boop and I have the same picks. You have two different. We could end up in a 3-way tie if you get your two right this week.
Could.
How about that?
Keep an eye on it.
All right. Margin of victory
survivor pool.
Yeah. Let's see. Last week, Boop lost another one. He has 3 losses now in the 8 games. Lucky it's not a survivor pool or he'd be buried. But it's margin of victory. You get 0 points when your team that you pick loses. So Boop has 3 of those situations this week. I'm 8-0. I have never gone this far, I don't think, in a survivor pool. 8 weeks being undefeated. And I'm getting some big wins too. 17 points this past week. You're complaining because the Ravens gave up a late score or two, so you only got 7 points.
10 late points, but I thought they had it locked up. Bummer.
So I have a massive 65-point lead right now over you, 141-76, but long way to go. And boy, does it get tough moving forward now because there aren't a whole lot of good teams out there. Boop takes. Yeah, I had a feeling he's going to take this same team as me. Boop took the Browns. I took the Cleveland Browns because they're playing those stinking Arizona Cardinals. So, yeah.
I took the Browns.
Yeah, I figured we might all take the Browns.
Oh, I'm not doing that. I can't make any headway that way. I'm going to take the New York Football Giants.
No, you're not.
Against the Raiders.
That is your margin of victory. You heard it here.
Well, I really wanted Cleveland. I have Cleveland on my paper.
Okay, but you're taking the Giants.
Yeah, we can't all go 3 the same. Somebody got to man up.
Okay.
All right. Well, hey, Chet, we got to talk about this. Knicks have moved on from James Harden. People want to know. There's a comment way back here, but it wasn't time yet. Want to know Chet's opinion on James Harden. I wouldn't call it a blockbuster trade, but the Sixers are rid of another guy that didn't want to play for them.
All right, here's the trade. A lot of names, not necessarily any huge stars other than James Harden, who I guess is still a star, certainly. PJ Tucker, he's gone. Philippe Petrusev, a young guy that they had some high hopes for, he's gone to the Clippers. Sixers get aging Marcus Morris Sr. Robert Covington returns to where it all started for him. Nick Batum and Kelvin Martin's son, KJ Martin. So a lot of names plus some draft picks as well. So I like the trade. I really do, mainly because Harden is gone. I just didn't like him being around. I thought it was a distraction for the 76ers. I'm glad he's out of here. This will allow Tyrese Maxey to continue his development. And I know it's a small sample size this year, 3 games, but he has looked very good so far. He's putting up points and distributing the ball, not many turnovers. I like Maxey, and I think having Harden there would have been bad news. Granted, Harden did help Maxey a lot over the last year and a half that he was there, but it's Maxey's time. Glad Harden's out of here. You got some draft picks in the return also, and a bunch of expiring contracts that will allow you to do more next offseason. So I am all on board with this, Bill.
Well, I tell you what, they got a haul. They got a lot bigger haul than I thought with those draft picks.
I did too, yeah.
They're not maybe, there's some first round picks mixed in there that might turn out to be something. But, I think when we have more time and we do a little more Sixers show, I think we need to drill down a little bit and try to determine, why do people not want to play here? Why did we lose that one guy who we won't name? Okay. And now we've lost this guy. These guys are superstar players. The one was a superstar before he wet his pants. This one, he just quit.
Okay, forgive me for saying this if this is not politically correct, but both of the two guys you're referring to are head cases, Bill. They're both a little bit goofy in the head as far as their basketball mentality. But
aren't they all? Aren't they all?
But, I mean, Harden, how many times has he done this? He forces his way out of his existing spot. And that was one of the reasons I was hesitant when they got him. I finally got on board with it just because they were getting the other guy out of town. And then he played reasonably well most of last season until, crunch time in the playoffs. So I'm glad he's gone. I hope it works out. I will watch more of the Sixers now that he's not going to be part of it. And I'm still not going to say, the Sixers are going to contend now. It'll probably end up the way the last several seasons have gone, a second round exit, but at least he's gone and it'll be more fun to watch.
Okay. So one final real quick question on this topic. Are they better today on the court? We know they're better without Harden, not the cancer not being there. Are they better on the court today than they were yesterday?
Absolutely. And I just say that because I think it'll help Maxey mentally, knowing that there's not somebody there, willing to or ready to take his point guard spot. Plus, some of these guys I think will contribute, and there's not a whole lot of difference from yesterday to today. But I don't know how much Harden was going to have left in the tank anyway had he played. As Paul mentions, Kelly Oubre looks good. He can score. So I think they have a decent bench. Look, Tucker, he was a good defensive player, yeah, but 2 or 3 points a game, I don't care how good you are defensively. I like the deal. Go Sixers. Let's move on, Bill.
All right. We'll talk more about it down the road, I'm sure. But, hey, with football season in full swing, what's that mean to Bob Cavanaugh and the gang at Cavs Philly Tailgates?
Well, Cavs Philly Tailgates has been cooking up terrific catering business for more than 30 years. They're known for their tailgate parties. Cavs a 3-time winner of Philly Tailgates, Jack Daniels Great American Tailgate Party Contest, and a past winner of the Philly Daily News Tailgate. They do corporate events and parties, you name it. And they have tailgate parties also before all of the Eagles home games, including November 5th, this Sunday against the Cowboys, and later this month when the Bills come to town. Those are held outside Live Casino, not far from the stadium complex. Order your tickets for those events via the website, phillytailgates.com. Check the site, and if you have any questions, you can email them at cavscatering@verizon.net. Cavs Philly Tailgates is the way to go. And don't forget that Philly Sports Trips are also doing their thing. They've got a lot of trips coming up later this month and into December. As a matter of fact, you can go to all the Eagles away games, including, that Kansas City trip. That is a good one. It's a Monday night game. You can be out there with Philly Sports Trips. Check out their website, phillysportstrips.com, and get all the details.
All right. Hey, Chet, we were going to talk a little bit about that Hall of Fame banquet tomorrow, but let's table that, and then you give us a update next week on how it went. How's that?
Yeah, hoping to say hello to Irving Fryer, Jeremiah Trotter, Jay Wright will be there getting inducted. A lot of big names. And from what I'm hearing from a source, there will be a lot of other celebs in the house because this is their 20th anniversary celebration. And I know there's going to be a bunch of former Flyers there in Joe Watson's area. So it's going to be a great night. I will have all the details next week. I'll give you a nice little wrap up and hopefully some interviews.
Let's do it. All right. Hey, great guests tonight in Tim Kelly and Joe Watson. Who's coming to Philly Press Box Radio next week?
Well, just firmed this up right before the show. Can I find the picture? Nah, I can't. But trust me, you know what he looks like because he's been here 22 times. Brandon Lee Gouton of Bleeding Green Nation will be on our show next week to talk mostly Eagles and a little Sixers as well. BLG from BGN next week.
BLG, always good. He'll
Always.
certainly have a breakdown of the Cowboys game, however that all plays out.
Oh, yeah.
All right. Anything else before we wrap it up real quick?
Penn State hosts Maryland this week. Maryland has lost three straight, I believe. The Knicks can win this one, and then I guess Michigan next. Oh, boy.
Well, there's a bye in there.
Yeah.
Penn State came out in the first rankings ranked number 12.
That sounds about right, yeah.
Yeah.
Ohio State number 1. How about that?
Yep. Not surprised.
Wrap it up,
All
Bill.
right, let's wrap it up. Let's thank tonight's special guests, Tim Kelly and Joe Watson, our sponsors, the Irish Rover Station House, Cavs Philly Tailgates, PPCC 118 Raz Room, and Dave Lavoie of Allstate Insurance in Westchester, PA. For Jim Chet Chesko, this is Bill Furman. We hope you enjoyed the show. We'll join Philly Press Box Radio next Wednesday, November 8th at 7 p.m. You can see us live on Facebook. Listen to our website, phillypressboxradio.com, on Google Podcasts, as well as Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, and all the others. High hopes, Philadelphia sports fans, and go Birds.
And now, folks, that's it. Good night to all of you, and good night, Mrs. Calabash, wherever you are.